August 1973. A terrified teenager reports a fatal shooting just outside of Houston, Texas.
When I got there, walked in and saw the naked body with him shot 6 times, and I knew that this was not just an ordinary shooting.
The discovery exposes a crime so chilling that even hardened detectives find themselves reeling in horror.
We like to think of ourselves as big, tough guys and experienced men at this. We were all just absolutely in shock.
Houston, Texas, in the early 1970s, a sprawling industrial city on the verge of a big boom. There are areas of the city, however, whose time has come and gone. One of these neighborhoods is on Houston's northwest side. It's called the Heights.
At one time, the Heights was a very upper-class socioeconomic area back around the turn of the century. But then by the 70s, there was sort of an economic downturn within the Heights.
There's also been a rash of teen runaways, chalked up to problems at home or school.
Some parents, they would file missing persons reports. They would bug the police. They would look for their children, but those were a minority. The great majority of parents, as I remember it, simply decided that their child had left.
At that time, the Houston Police Department did not have a missing persons division. But I do know that there were several teenagers from the Heights area, maybe up to 13, that had been reported missing in the early 70s.
May 29, 1971. Dorothy Hillegeist says goodbye to her 13-year-old son David and his 16-year-old friend Molly Winkle as they head off to the neighborhood swimming pool. The boys are last seen getting into a van not far from the Hillegeist home. When they fail to return home, their families report their disappearance to the police.
Well, it was often assumed that if a teenage boy was missing, that he was a runaway, or he just decided to lay out several nights staying with friends.
That couldn't be farther from the truth. Dorothy Hillegeist refuses to believe that her happy, outgoing son is a runaway. As the days pass, the family combs the Houston area, offers a $1,000 reward, and even seeks the advice of a psychic.
And his mother went around and put up pictures of him and notices on utility poles and all kinds of things. Now, she really tried to find him.
Neighborhood friends, including 15-year-old Wayne Henley, help in the search effort. But after months, there isn't a single lead. Molly Winkle and David Hillegeist have vanished into thin air. They're still missing a year later when 17-year-old Billy Balch and friend Johnny DeLome also disappear. Once again, cops figure that the boys had to have gone missing on purpose. Billy's family checks with friends, classmates, and neighbors, but no one has seen the missing teenager anywhere. The Balch family is still searching for Billy in November of 1972, when their 15-year-old son Michael vanishes too. Not one of the Heights boys ever comes home, and still, cops are oblivious to the evil lurking right under their noses. But not for long. The early morning hours of Wednesday, August 8, 1973. 3 teenagers are on their way to Pasadena, Texas, another Houston suburb, about 20 miles from the Heights. Rhonda Williams, Wayne Henley, and his friend Tim Curley have only one thing on their minds. They've come to Pasadena to party.
Wayne Henley was a very bright, streetwise 17-year-old. A school dropout. He lived at home with his mother. I don't think his father was around much in his teenage years.
Rhonda Williams was the girl that Henley had been dating some. She was from a broken home, didn't have a lot of parental direction. Tim Curley was, I believe, 19 years old at the time, and he was just interested in a night of partying where they smoked marijuana and sniffed glue and whatever they wanted to do.
At 3 a.m., the three teenagers enter a house at 2020 Lamar Drive in Pasadena, unaware that partying will soon be the last thing on their minds. At 8:30 a.m., the Pasadena Police Department gets a frantic phone call.
I had just come to work in the detective division and was on my first cup of coffee, and the Lieutenant Goad pointed his finger at me and said, "Come here, you got a shooting," and he handed me the address, 2020 Lamar.
When Detective Sergeant David Mulliken arrives at the scene, he finds a Pasadena police officer waiting outside with an empty .22 caliber pistol and 3 suspects, none other than Wayne Henley, Rhonda Williams, and Tim Curley.
The first officer to respond to the call that morning was uniformed patrolman Jerry Jameson. He was met by Henley and Curley and Rhonda. They were sitting on the curb out in front of the house. And Henley said, "I just killed a man. He's in the house."
At 34, Mulliken is a 12-year veteran with the Pasadena Police Department. He's about to take on the biggest case of his career. Inside, Mulliken finds the naked body of a man lying face down in the hallway outside a small bedroom, his feet tangled in telephone cord, his back and shoulder riddled with bullet holes. The scene inside the bedroom is even more shocking.
Of course, when I got there, walked in and saw the naked body with him shot 6 times, all kinds of sexual objects, and I knew that this was not just an ordinary shooting.
On the morning of August 8, 1973, investigators from the Pasadena, Texas Police Department are investigating a bizarre scene. Outside sit 3 teenagers, one of whom has confessed to murder. Inside lies a man's naked body with 6 bullet holes in his back and shoulder.
Walked in and saw the naked body with him shot 6 times, and looked in the room and saw the floor was covered with plastic sheet, and this, what we call a body board, was laying there with handcuffs attached to it, all kinds of sexual objects, and I knew that this was not just an ordinary shooting.
Searching the home for evidence, Detective Sergeant Mulliken uncovers 8 more sets of handcuffs, as well as binding tape, rope, and petroleum jelly. In the garage, Mulliken finds a van containing a wooden box that looks like a small casket. He also finds traces of white lime on the floor. Police ID the victim. He is 33-year-old electrician Dean Corll, a former resident of the Heights whom everyone knew as the Candy Man.
Dean Corll earned the nickname the Candy Man because his younger days, his family owned a candy company, a small candy company located in the Heights. And he often gave candy away to kids in the neighborhood.
Well, most of the people that lived around him in the neighborhood, they said he was a nice guy. He'd help them get their car started, or, you know, do little things in the neighborhood for people.
And they all kind of liked him. Nice, friendly. He was a very good-looking man. And he was friends with the kids on the block that would be walking from the elementary school and the junior high school. Sometimes he would take kids on rides in his van. Nobody really had anything bad to say about him.
So how did this friendly neighborhood man end up murdered? At police headquarters, the three teenagers are questioned, and all three tell the same story. Wayne Henley says he's known Dean Corll for several years, that he and many of his friends hung around with the Candyman in the Heights before his recent move to Pasadena.
Corll appeared to be a lot of fun to be around, and he did provide parties that other teenagers went to. So I think the teenagers enjoyed being around him because he was an older man who showed them a lot of fun.
Corll had seemed a bit taken aback that Wayne had showed up with a girl. But they're able to smooth things over, and the party is soon underway.
Henley and Curly and this girl stayed up all night doing what they called huffing, or sniffing glue and paint and whatever they had handy. And they passed out, and when they woke up, Corll had them all handcuffed.
The teens have both their ankles and wrists shackled. Rhonda and Tim have masking tape over their mouths. Brandishing a knife and a gun, Dean Corll vows to kill them all, but only after he has his fun.
Henley knew the jig was up, that Corll was getting ready to do him. So he talked to Corll and convinced him to take the handcuffs off and that he would help him do the others. Then they strapped Curly to one side of what we call a bodyboard, then strapped the girl to the other side and told Henley, you have sex with the girl while I have sex with the boy.
I don't have any doubt in my mind that Henley knew that if he didn't do something to Dean Corll right then, that he would kill those two. And when he got his hand on a gun is when he started firing and shot Dean Corll dead.
Since Rhonda and Curly's account of the night's events match Henley's, the shooting seems to be a simple case of self-defense. But there's nothing simple about the case of the Candyman. August 8, 1973. Homicide detectives in Pasadena, Texas, are investigating the shooting death of 33-year-old Dean Corll, an electrician with the Houston Light and Power Company. The confessed shooter is 17-year-old Wayne Henley, who says he killed Corll to save himself and two friends from being raped and murdered. Hard to believe the friendly face everyone knows as the Candyman could be such a monster. Dean Corll spent most of his early adulthood helping his mother with her confection business, making candy at night while earning a regular salary as an electrician during the day.
Our investigation into Dean Corll's background indicated that, he was a loner, sort of a nomadic person. He did spend most of his time with teenagers. He moved every few months and had very few acquaintances outside of his employment with people his own age.
Instead, he preferred the company of teenage boys, like Wayne Henley and another teenager, 18-year-old David Brooks.
David Brooks was the typical teenager at the time. He lived in the Heights area, smart, streetwise, but a loner, and someone who spent a lot of time on the street.
Dean Corll's parents both admit that their son was very depressed in the days leading up to his death and talked about being in some kind of trouble. Still, detectives are unprepared for what Wayne Henley reveals next.
He started telling me that was one reason he had killed Corll, because he had a warehouse full of bodies. Back when Henley told me about this, what he called a warehouse, I was pretty skeptical at the time.
But Wayne has names to back up his story, boys who have disappeared from the Heights: Marty Jones, Charles Cobble, and David Hillegeist. A call to Houston Homicide confirms that all 3 boys are missing. Jones and Cobble disappeared within the last 2 weeks. Hillegeist has been missing for more than 2 years. Henley thinks he knows where they are. On the afternoon of August 8, 1973, the teenager leads detectives from the Pasadena and Houston police departments to the Southwest Boat Storage Facility in South Houston.
It was just a series of sheds made out of metal in which people stored boats or automobiles or all the junk they had assembled and didn't have any use for.
Wayne Henley pointed out stall number 11 as the stall where he suspected some bodies were buried. And at that time, we didn't believe him. Even though there were some bizarre things found at the house, we didn't believe that there were multiple bodies buried in this boat shed. The boat shed, however, was locked. So I went to the manager's office and asked who, of course, it was rented to. And she informed me it was Dean Corll.
When we opened the door, Henley turned white as a sheet. And when I was looking at him, I knew the boy was telling the truth.
Inside, police find a dirt floor partially covered by carpet.
There was a lot of junk and shovels, and there was an old stripped out car.
And there were bicycles, shoes, jackets, and there were some sacks of lime.
And there were a number of raised places in the ground that looked like they were freshly dug up.
The detectives have brought some trustees from the local jail to help with the digging. Not far down, they reach a layer of white powder that they identify as lime. Minutes later, shovels hit something buried 6 inches below the surface. It's a body wrapped in clear plastic sheeting, the same kind found in Dean Corll's bedroom.
Then we started scraping the dirt away in a more gentle fashion so we could preserve the bodies. We didn't want cuts and things from the shovels hitting the bodies.
It's the naked body of a young boy, a heavy cord tied tightly around his neck. Wayne Henley's outrageous story is true. The county medical examiner is called to the scene along with a team of forensic experts, and they continue to dig. The owner of the storage facility tells police that Dean Corll has been renting the shed for almost 2 years. She describes him as a nice man who came around 2 or 3 times a week. He'd recently inquired about renting a second unit. It's not long before the press gets wind of the grisly discovery.
Of course, there were TV crews and news media all over the place. In fact, I asked one of the TV guys if I could let Henley use his car phone, call his mom. And that's one of the famous scenes on the news. Henley called his mom on television.
Mama, it's Wayne. Mama, I killed Dean. I killed Dean.
Inside the shed, police discover a second body, more decomposed than the first, but definitely that of a young person.
It was a hot day, and the smell would just knock you over. Everybody was all upset, because they had never seen anything like it, I don't think.
An interview with Wayne Henley hits the 10 o'clock news, alerting everyone in Houston to the horror story that's unfolding. The news sends a shockwave of fear through the families of missing boys. At Houston Homicide, detectives gather files on teenagers who have disappeared over the past several years. The stack grows to almost 50 cases from the Heights alone. Meantime, police divide the boat shed floor into sections and begin systematically digging their way down. As the night wears on, a third body is discovered, then a fourth, and a fifth.
It seems like almost every place they dug in there, they found another body. And every time there was a new body found, I would have to run like 200 yards to the nearest telephone and phone in to my office, another body had been found.
By midnight, 8 bodies have been recovered and sent to the county medical examiner for autopsy and identification. At the scene, investigators sift through the soil for evidence.
When we started diagramming the different locations, some of them were 3 deep. There'd be a body and dirt and a body and dirt and a body on top of each other.
The search is not over, and by the light of day, the case will take a turn that no one, not even the most hardened detectives, could ever imagine.
We like to think of ourselves as big, tough guys and experienced men at this. We were all just absolutely in shock.
This was the crime of the century. People just didn't realize that other human beings could do what Dean Corll did to these kids.
Thursday, August 9th, 1973. The discovery of 8 bodies buried in a Houston storage shed grabs headlines across the U.S. and around the world. At the center of the story is murdered electrician Dean Corll, now believed responsible for the abduction and murder of countless teenage boys from the Heights neighborhood in Houston.
The newspaper reports I have read from that time are pretty detailed, to the point that you knew that there was some kind of sexual abuse going on with these individuals. And even parents as far away as Austin were being very careful where their teenage boys went at night after this all hit the news, because it was quite terrifying.
The hero of the hour is teenager Wayne Henley, who led police to Corll's graveyard after narrowly escaping the Candyman's wrath himself.
There's no doubt about the fact that at the time Henley killed Corll, that under the law he was acting in self-defense and defense of third persons, that being Rhonda and Tim.
Yet, with 8 bodies already uncovered and the search for more ongoing, Detective Sergeant David Mulligan finds it hard to believe Dean Corll acted alone. He has a few more questions for Wayne Henley.
We established a pretty good rapport, and I treated him right, He was appreciative of that. He was pretty honest with me.
And the more he talks, the clearer it becomes that Henley isn't just an innocent bystander. The reason he knew the victims' names is because he was there when they met the Candyman.
When we uncovered the first one, and Henley said that's Dramala, then I knew that he had, played a significant role, and that we were going to find what he said was there.
Turns out there's a lot more to Henley's relationship with Corll than he originally let on.
Wayne Henley's relationship with Dean Corll was that Dean Corll was a Svengali to him. I think Corll had a great deal of influence over his life and began to cultivate that relationship with him when he was very young, about 14. Henley's relationship with Corll was that of a procurer. He procured young males for Corll to have sex with on the streets of the Heights and wherever he could find them. He lured them to the house under the pretense that he had some marijuana or he had some other type of drugs to use, and or they were going to have a party. And that's the way he enticed those boys to come to Dean Corll's house.
Henley makes it clear that he took no part in the sexual abuse, torture, or murder of any of the victims, though he admits that he was sometimes there when it happened. But by now, another eyewitness has come forward, and he's telling a very different story. Earlier that morning, building contractor Alton Brooks arrives at Houston Homicide. His 18-year-old son David has some information that is about to blow this case wide open. The teenager admits to helping Wayne Henley procure neighborhood boys for Dean Corll. He assures police that he had nothing to do with the killings, but claims the same cannot be said for Henley.
Henley had not mentioned Brooks until that time. And when I told him that, he said, well, that's good, because now I can tell you the whole story.
Well, at first, he was upset because he was informed that David Brooks had denied any involvement in anything. And so we took Wayne Henley to the Houston Police Department, and he was given the opportunity to speak directly to David Brooks and urge David Brooks to tell the truth.
Meanwhile, under the media's watchful eye, investigators uncover 9 more bodies in the boat shed, bringing the total to 17. The county medical examiner identifies some of the bodies that same afternoon. Among them, teenage brothers Donald and Jerry Waldrop, found in the same clothes they had on when they went missing.
They did go quite heavily on personal effects at that time. There are many of these boys that had dental exams and dental x-rays. So the ones who were identified first tended to be the ones that were better preserved.
Many more families contact police about their lost children, searching for answers, but fearful of what those answers might mean.
The poor parents I talked to, I can't describe anything other than shock. That it was one of their children that had been tortured, perhaps sexually abused, and murdered and buried in a plastic sheet. This is before Gacy in Chicago. Nothing like this had ever really happened. A series of serial killings, this many bodies.
Now it's David Brooks' turn to come clean. He admits knowing Dean Corll since he was 14, actually living with him at several of his residences in the Heights. He also admits to taking part in the Candyman's sadistic rituals.
David Brooks never alluded to a sexual relationship between the two of them. However, I think that he was the one who would solicit these young boys to, would befriend them to associate with Dean Corll, whose motive we well know was sex, torture, and eventually killing.
It is David Brooks who first introduces Corll to Wayne Henley in late 1971.
Henley may at one time have been a potential victim, but for some reason Corll liked him, and he agreed to engage in similar activity, procurement activity, with David Brooks, and so he was spared.
Corll promised Henley $200 for every boy he would bring, and so it turned into a semi-business relationship. They used what they call the handcuff trick on a lot of them. Henley would put handcuffs on, and then he'd have a key in his back pocket, and he'd let himself out of the cuffs. Then they'd tell the kid, you know, you try this. Of course, he didn't have a key, so then they'd take him down.
What would happen next, both boys explain, was like something out of a nightmare.
He would lay down a sheet of plastic and put the board on top of it, and then he'd have his fun with his victims. And then after he'd kill them, they just wrap them up in that plastic. So nothing was ever got onto the carpet or anything. They wrapped them in plastic, put them in a body box, and take them to where they were going to bury them.
David Brooks swears that he never killed anyone and even saved a boy named Billy Ridinger by persuading Corll to let him go. He does admit to being present during some of the murders and names some additional victims, including Billy Balch and Johnny DeLome.
Once David Brooks started talking, it was almost like a machine. Dude, it was like monotone. There was no passion. It was just a recitation of events. It was very eerie.
Now, Wayne Henley has more to tell and confesses to executing several of Corll's victims.
In fact, he told about one of the murders, how he had committed it, took the gun and put it in the guy's mouth while he was sitting there tied up. And then he pulled the trigger. It was one of his classmates in the school.
I was shocked at how many specific names both Henley and Brooks were able to remember, the order in which they were killed, and where they were buried. They didn't miss much.
And still, there are more bodies to come. Wayne Henley accompanies detectives to a wooded area not far from Lake Sam Rayburn, 150 miles northeast of Houston.
Henley he could tell us exactly where to go. We drove down this little dirt road for a while, and he said, stop right here, there's 2 bodies here. And we went out, and sure enough, there were 2 there. The next morning, we went back out to the woods, and he showed us where the 2 other bodies were.
3 of the victims have been strangled by cords still tight around their necks. The 4th is bound by a hangman's noose. All 4 bodies show signs of torture and mutilation. The next day, Brooks and Henley lead police to a 3rd site near the tiny beach community of High Island, 80 miles to the south. The media follows close behind as the teenagers walk the beach, pointing out places where bodies are buried.
There's just a huge sand pile down there along the beach where it's come in. And Brooks was looking over his head with all these deputies around him. I said, by God, this a chance to get them together. I never thought I'd ever get a picture of them together. Yeah, I shot.
They're 17 and 18 years old, and they've just really stepped into what's going to govern the rest of their lives, and you can see it in their faces. And I look at the waste, not only of their lives, but of all these young lives, and that picture comes back to me.
Wayne Henley and David Brooks lead police to 6 more graves on High Island, bringing the body count to 27.
I wouldn't have been surprised if there were 1,000 bodies. I mean, the story was just that big, and who knows how long it had been going on.
Only one man knows the answer to that question. And on that same Friday, while his victims' bodies are being lifted from the sand of High Island, Dean Corll, the Candyman, is laid to rest, taking his deep, dark secret to the grave. Monday, August 13, 1973. In Houston, Texas, a grand jury convenes to hear witnesses in the murder case that has taken the county, the country, and the world by storm. The focus is on Wayne Henley and David Brooks, the young men who led police to the bodies of 27 teenagers brutally murdered over a 3-year period, and who admit to playing a role in the killings. The anguish and outrage are felt most deeply in the Heights, the Houston neighborhood where 18 of the victims lived and died.
The community was very upset that something like that might not have been investigated well. We had 2 sets of brothers, which must have been very difficult for the families.
And it's impossible to fathom how Corll could have wielded so much control over his accomplices.
I think Dean Corll was more of a Svengali to both David Brooks and Wayne Henley. He had a great deal of influence over them. Both of them fairly smart, streetwise kids, but they were immature, very young, when they fell under the influence of Dean Corll. He was the real bad guy in this case. I don't think either one of them would have engaged in this type of activity on their own. I think some of their acts were done in fear of what might happen to them. But as time went on, I think Wayne Henley got involved in it. It was a power thing with him. He had the power over life and death. And he might have got addicted a little bit to that.
Whatever the reason, his relationship with the Candyman was apparently worth killing over. Both Curley and Henley's girlfriend, Rhonda Williams, testify at the August 13th hearing, reliving their terrifying experience on the early morning hours of August 8th. It's clear to witnesses at the hearing that on the night he shot Dean Corll, Wayne Henley's intention was to offer Tim Curley as the Candyman's next victim. Billy Ridinger, the boy that David Brooks let go, also testifies to Dean Corll's sadistic cravings.
In '73, when we dug up all the bodies, it had been about 2 years since Ridinger's incident. He was the only known survivor that had ever gone in there and lived to tell about it.
Police discontinue the search for more victims at the end of September, despite rumors of bodies buried elsewhere. By October of 1973, all but 6 bodies have been positively identified.
We were not able to get any information or any evidence to indicate there were any more than 27 victims, because 27 was all that Wayne Henley and David Brooks knew about. But it's quite possible, in fact, it may be probable, that there were others that they did not know about.
In 1974, David Brooks pleads guilty to 1 count of murder in the death of teenager Billy Lawrence.
Well, the evidence against Brooks was the fact that he gave a confession. That was number 1. And his association with Henley and Dean Corll. And he admitted to being there when some of the murders were committed, so it didn't take a lot.
Elmer Wayne Henley's trial was a media circus. The only thing I can equate it to was his O.J. Simpson trial without the television in the courtroom.
The trial itself was pretty much an anticlimactic situation as far as making news went. I mean, the facts were there. The defense was essentially trying to paddle up Niagara Falls, which was impossible. And he was summarily convicted.
Wayne Henley is sentenced to 6 concurrent 99-year terms, while David Brooks gets 1 99-year term. In 1994, the medical examiner's office uses a new technique called forensic reconstruction to try to identify one of the Candyman's unnamed victims.
We had an artist do drawings from the skulls. She did an extremely good job.
Forensic artist Lois Gibson uses a life-size photograph of the skull to trace a corresponding outline on paper and on clear acetate.
When Cecil Wingo gave me the skull to work on from the Dean Corll murders, it was only the second time I'd ever done a reconstruction. And when I did work on that skull, I could tell it was a young, attractive boy. It had his whole life ahead of him, and it is kind of sad. I remember Cecil Wingo looking at it, and when he saw it, he went, ho, 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 and he got out the picture, and it was obvious.
The skull belongs to 18-year-old Mark Scott, thought to have run away in early 1972 after trouble with the law. Now, decades later, only 3 of the bodies have yet to be identified. DNA comparisons have been inconclusive, but the search goes on. David Brooks and Wayne Henley continue to serve their life sentences in federal prison, despite several applications for parole.
In one respect, the shooting of Corll saved Henley's life. In another respect, it was the worst thing that could have happened to him. Because if Corll had been alive, he would have been the great evil perpetrator. And Henley would have been looked at as an accomplice at best, and perhaps not spent the rest of his life in prison as he will.
I don't think there's a chance that Henley will ever be paroled. Probably if he was, he wouldn't live long, because there's still a lot of relatives out here that are still grieving. I don't think Brooks will ever get out either.
Well, I think this case had a lasting impact on this community. People kept their children on a shorter leash than they did in the past. I think they paid more attention to where they were, who they were with. I know I did with my family.
It took a lot out of me emotionally during those days. It was a hard thing to see all those young kids murdered like that and brutalized, but at the same time, it did me some good to know that I had a hand in stopping it. It's just something I'm glad is over.